What kind of man believes a corpse can be his bride and lives with her for 7 years? Karl Tanzler, a German-born radiologist in 1930s Florida, wasn't just an eccentric doctor. He was a man consumed by a delusion so bizarre, it defies comprehension. Before you dive into this chilling tale, hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with friends who love a shocking true story. Comment below. Could you imagine a love so twisted it defies death itself born? Georg Karl Tanzler, on February 8, 1877, in Dresden, Germany. Karl was a dreamer with a restless spirit. By his own account, he saw visions as a child dreams, where his ancestor Countess Anna Constantia von Cosel showed him a dark-haired beauty, destined to be his soulmate. This wasn't a childish fantasy. It was a fixation that would shape his life. In his 20s, Karl wandered the world, India, Australia, the Pacific Islands, chasing adventure and engineering dreams. Like a trans-ocean flyer, he never finished. During World War I, his German heritage landed him in an Australian internment camp, fueling his sense of isolation. By 1926, he arrived in the United States, settling in Zephyr Hills, Florida, with a wife, Doris, and 2 children. But Karl was no family man. He abandoned them, claiming Doris wasn't his true love, and moved to Key West, where he reinvented himself as Count Karl von Cosel, a self-proclaimed noble with 9 university degrees. Historians dispute these claims, noting his actual role as a radiology technician, not a doctor, at the U.S. Marine Hospital. In April 1930, Karl's world shifted. Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, a 21-year-old Cuban-American beauty, walked into the hospital for a tuberculosis test. Her dark hair and delicate features matched the woman from his visions. Karl, then 53, was smitten. Elena, the daughter of a local cigar maker, was vibrant but frail, her marriage to Luis Mesa crumbling after a miscarriage. Tuberculosis, a death sentence in the 1930s, loomed over her. Karl saw not a patient, but destiny. He took over her care, bypassing hospital rules with homemade tonics, X-ray machines hauled to her home, and lavish gifts, jewelry, dresses, perfume. He proposed daily, his obsession blinding him to Elena's discomfort. Historical accounts confirm she never reciprocated, politely rebuffing him while battling her illness. Karl's behavior was more than eccentric. It was alarming. He spoke of Elena as his bride, claiming her spirit communicated with him. Modern psychologists might diagnose him with erotomania, a delusional belief that someone loves you despite evidence to the contrary. His colleagues noticed his fixation, whispering about the crazy German who ignored his duties to chase a dying girl. Yet Karl's wealth and charm disarmed suspicion. He paid for Elena's treatments, winning her family's trust, though they later admitted unease at his intensity. On October 25, 1931, Elena succumbed to tuberculosis at age 22. Karl was devastated, but not defeated. He paid for her funeral, commissioning an ornate mausoleum in Key West Cemetery, complete with electricity and a telephone line. Why a telephone? The answer lies in Karl's growing madness, a secret that would soon turn macabre. What drove a man to such obsession? How far would he go to keep his soulmate? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling next chapter of Karl Tanzler's story. The Mausoleum of Obsession. How far would you go to hold on to a love that death has claimed? For Karl Tanzler, the answer was a descent into a chilling obsession that turned a Key West mausoleum into a shrine of madness. If this haunting tale of a man's twisted devotion has you hooked, hit that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who crave dark history. Drop a comment below. What would you think if you discovered someone visiting a grave wasn't there to mourn, but to steal sepulchres martyrs? Milagro de Hoyos died on October 25, 1931. Karl Tanzler's world didn't stop. It warped. The 53-year-old radiologist, convinced Elena was his destined soulmate, refused to let her go. He had already bankrolled her funeral, insisting on a lavish mahogany coffin and a private mausoleum in Key West Cemetery. Historical records show he spent hundreds of dollars, equivalent to thousands today, on a stone crypt with a locked iron gate, complete with electric lights and a telephone line. To Elena's grieving family, it seemed an act of generosity from a devoted doctor. But Carl's intentions were far from noble. He visited the tomb nightly, sitting for hours, whispering to Elena through the telephone, claiming her spirit answered back. Modern psychologists might call this a delusion rooted in erotomania, but to Carl, it was love transcending death. By 1932, Carl's visits grew more secretive. Cemetery workers noticed him lingering after dark, carrying strange bags. He claimed he was preserving Elena's memory, but the truth was far darker. In April 1933, under cover of night, Carl did the unthinkable. He stole Elena's body. Using his radiology expertise, he smuggled the corpse from the mausoleum to his home, a modest cottage on Flagler Avenue. How he managed this without detection remains a mystery, though some historians suggest he bribed a groundskeeper or exploited lax cemetery security. What's certain is that Carl's obsession had crossed into the macabre. Inside his home, Carl began a grotesque project. He wasn't content to let Elena decay. Using skills from his medical background, he set about preserving her body. Court records from 1940 detail his methods. He reinforced her skeleton with wire hangers, stuffed her torso with rags, and coated her skin with plaster and wax to mimic life. Glass eyes replaced her own, and he crafted a wig from her hair, which he'd collected during her illness. Perfume masked the stench of decay, and he dressed her in silk gowns, jewelry adorning her brittle fingers. To Carl, this wasn't a corpse, it was his bride. He named her Elena von Kossel, claiming she was now his eternal wife. Carl's daily life became a bizarre charade. He propped Elena's body in a chair, played music for her, and danced with her in his living room, her stiffened form swaying in his arms. Neighbors noticed his reclusive habits, but chalked it up to grief. He rarely worked, living off savings and odd jobs, his world revolving around his macabre companion. A 1939 neighbor's account recalls hearing Carl sing to someone at night, though no one else lived in his home. Modern analysis suggests Carl's actions reflect a severe dissociative state, where fantasy overpowered reality. He wrote in his diary, later published, that Elena's spirit guided him, urging him to restore her beauty. Yet cracks were forming. Elena's family grew suspicious. Her sister Nana noticed Carl's evasiveness when asked about the mausoleum, which he claimed was under repair. By 1940, rumors swirled in Key West's tight-knit community. A boy reported seeing Carl dancing with a doll through his window, sparking whispers. The truth was inching closer to exposure, but Carl remained oblivious, lost in his delusion. What kind of mind could justify such acts? How long could Carl hide his secret before the world saw his bride? The next part dives into the moment his house of horrors was uncovered. Stay with us and tell us in the comments. Does Carl's obsession terrify you, or do you pity his madness? The House of Secrets. What happens when a man's love for a corpse becomes a secret, too grotesque to stay hidden? 1940. Carl Tanzler's quiet cottage in Key West had become a shrine to his delusion, where he lived with the mummified body of Elena de Hoyos, as if she were his living wife. If this chilling tale of obsession grips you, smash that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who love dark historical mysteries. Drop a comment below. Could you live next to someone hiding such a horrifying secret? For 7 years, Carl Tanzler maintained his macabre fantasy in plain sight. From 1933 to 1940, he lived with Elena's preserved body in his modest home on Flagler Avenue, a stone's throw from Key West's bustling streets. Historical accounts describe his routine as bizarrely domestic. Each morning, he dressed Elena in fresh gowns, combed her wig, and applied makeup to her wax-coated face. He played records Cuban ballads Elena loved in life, and danced with her, propping her rigid form against his chest. At night, he slept beside her in a bed, draped with silk curtains, whispering love poems as if she could hear. Carl's diary, later published, reveals his belief that Elena's spirit lived within the corpse, guiding him to perfect her beauty. Modern psychologists might diagnose this as a severe dissociative disorder, where Carl's reality fractured to sustain his delusion. His home was a fortress of secrecy. Carl boarded up windows, claiming it was for privacy, and rarely invited guests. Neighbors accustomed to Key West's eccentrics noticed his odd behavior, but didn't pry. A 1938 account from a delivery boy describes a funny smell from the house, like chemicals mixed with decay, but Carl dismissed it as medical supplies. He supported himself with savings and occasional radiology work, his reclusive lifestyle, raising few red flags in a town used to drifters and dreamers. Yet his obsession required constant upkeep. Court records from 1940 detail his gruesome efforts replacing rotting fabric with new rags, reapplying wax to Elena's skin, and using disinfectants to mask odors. The process was meticulous, a twisted blend of science and devotion. Elena's family, however, was growing restless. Her sister Nana Medina hadn't seen the mausoleum since Carl claimed it needed repairs. By 1939, she pressed him for answers, but Carl was evasive, offering vague excuses about preserving Elena's memory. Nana's suspicions deepened when she heard rumors of Carl's strange behavior. Key West, a small community of 12,000 house, buzzed with gossip. A bartender recalled Carl speaking of Elena as if she were alive, saying, "She visits me every night." Another neighbor saw him carrying heavy bags, likely supplies for his preservation work, late at night. Modern criminologists note that Carl's ability to deflect suspicion reflects a cunning manipulation, a hallmark of obsessive personalities. The tipping point came in October 1940. A teenage boy peering through a crack in Carl's window saw him dancing with what looked like a mannequin dressed in a white gown. The boy told his mother, who alerted Nana. Furious and fearful, Nana confronted Carl, demanding to see the mausoleum. When he refused, she contacted the police. On October 7, 1940, authorities searched Carl's home. What they found horrified them. Elena's mummified body adorned with jewelry and propped in a chair surrounded by flowers and lit candles. The room reeked of perfume and chemicals, a grotesque parody of a bridal suite. Officers described Carl as calm, even proud, insisting Elena was his wife. The discovery shocked Key West. Newspapers called it the corpse bride case, and crowds gathered outside Carl's home, torn between disgust and morbid curiosity. Elena's family was devastated, their grief reopened by Carl's desecration. How had he kept this secret for so long? What would the law do with a man who claimed love justified his crimes? The next part takes you into the aftermath, where Carl faces justice and Key West grapples with his madness. Stay with us and let us know in the comments. How does Carl's secret make you feel horrified or strangely sympathetic? The town in shock. What happens when a quiet town discovers a monster hiding in plain sight? In October 1940, Key West reeled as the horrifying truth about Carl Tanzler's secret life, with Elena de Hoyos's mummified body, came to light, turning a local eccentric into a figure of infamy. If this chilling tale of obsession and desecration has you gripped, hit that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who love shocking true crime stories. Drop a comment below. Could a community ever recover from such a gruesome revelation? The discovery of Elena's preserved corpse in Carl Tanzler's home sent shockwaves through Key West's tight-knit community. On October 7, 1940, police stormed his cottage, finding Elena's body seated in a velvet chair, dressed in a wedding gown, with glass eyes staring blankly. The scene was a grotesque blend of devotion and horror. Candles flickered around her perfume bottles, lined the shelves, and a gramophone sat ready to play her favorite songs. Officers gagged at the chemical stench, a mix of formaldehyde and decay. Carl, then 63, stood calmly, insisting he had done nothing wrong. "Elena is my wife," he said according to a 1940 police report. "Her spirit lives with me." To the horrified authorities, it was the work of a madman. Word spread like wildfire. By evening, crowds gathered outside Carl's home, some weeping, others shouting in disgust. Elena's sister, Nana Medina, collapsed in grief, her family's pain compounded by the violation of her sister's memory. The Key West Citizen ran a front-page story, dubbing Carl the Corpse Bride Doctor, a moniker that stuck. Reporters described the body's conditioned skin replaced with wax joints, wired like a marionette, and a wig crafted from Elena's own hair. Modern forensic experts estimate Carl's preservation took hundreds of hours, using techniques advanced for a radiology technician, but chilling in their purpose. He had created a macabre doll, a mockery of the vibrant woman Elena had been. Key West, a town of 12,000, known for its laid-back charm, was unprepared for such a scandal. Neighbors who once saw Carl as quirky now recoiled. A fisherman recalled Carl buying large quantities of wax and perfume, assuming it was for medical work. A grocer remembered his reclusive habits, rarely speaking, except to praise Elena. The community grappled with guilt. How had they missed the signs modern sociologists might point to the bystander effect, where people overlook odd behavior in familiar figures? Carl's charm and status as a hospital worker had shielded him his German accent and tales of nobility, adding an air of mystique. On October 9th, Carl was arrested, charged with maliciously disturbing a grave and wanton destruction of a tomb. The charges, relatively light for the crime's gravity, reflected 1940s legal limits. No law explicitly covered living with a corpse. Carl's defense was bizarre. He claimed Elena's spirit had begged him to save her from the grave. His diary seized by police detailed nightly conversations with her, blending romantic fantasy with occult beliefs. Psychologists today might diagnose delusional disorder, noting his inability to separate reality from his visions. Yet some locals pitied him, seeing a lonely man driven by grief. The case divided Key West. Some called for harsh punishment, outraged by the desecration. Others, swayed by Carl's tears and tales of love, saw him as a tragic figure. Elena's family demanded justice, their anguish raw as they faced the public spectacle. The body was taken for autopsy, revealing the extent of Carl's work organs, replaced with cotton bones, reinforced with wire. What would the courts decide? Could Carl's claims of love sway a jury? The next part dives into the trial that captivated a nation. Stay with us and tell us in the comments. Do you think Carl was a monster or a man broken by obsession, the trial of a madman? Can a man who claims love for a corpse convince a courtroom of his sanity? In October 1940, Carl Tanzler faced a trial that turned Key West into a circus of horror and fascination as the world grappled with the mind of a man who lived with a mummified body for 7 years. If this twisted tale of obsession has you riveted, smash that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who love dark true crime stories. Drop a comment below. Could Carl's claims of love sway you? Or was he simply a monster? The trial of Carl Tanzler began on October 28, 1940, in a packed Key West courtroom with reporters from as far as New York crowding the benches. Charged with maliciously disturbing a grave and wanton destruction of a tomb, Carl faced up to 7 years in prison, lenient charges for a crime so grotesque as 1940s Florida law had no precedent for necrophilia. The prosecution painted him as a depraved predator, presenting Elena de Hoyos's mummified body as evidence. Forensic reports detailed in court records described a chilling scene. Her corpse was a patchwork of wax plaster and rags with glass eyes and a silk wig, preserved with obsessive care. The coroner noted Carl's use of formaldehyde and perfumes to mask decay, a process that took years of meticulous effort. Carl, now 63, took the stand with unsettling calm. Dressed in a worn suit, his German accent thick, he spoke of Elena as his soulmate, insisting her spirit had guided him to save her from the grave. "She wanted to be with me," he told the court according to a 1940 Miami Herald report. He read from his diary describing visions where Elena's ghost urged him to preserve her body. His defense leaned on insanity, arguing his actions stemmed from a broken mind, not malice. Modern psychologists might diagnose erotomania, or a psychotic break, noting his delusional belief in Elena's reciprocation. Yet his eloquence and sincerity swayed some spectators who saw a tragic romantic rather than a criminal. The prosecution called witnesses to dismantle Carl's story. Elena's sister Nana Medina testified through tears, describing her family's betrayal. "He stole my sister's memory," she said, her voice breaking. Neighbors recounted Carl's reclusive habits, and a hospital colleague revealed his obsession with Elena during her illness, calling it unnatural. The most damning evidence was the body itself, displayed briefly in court, a sight that left jurors pale. A pathologist explained how Carl had replaced Elena's organs with cotton and wired her bones, creating a grotesque mannequin. The crowd gasped, some covering their eyes. To them, this wasn't love, it was desecration. Public reaction was split. Key West's Cuban community, including Elena's family, demanded harsh punishment, their grief fueling outrage. But others, captivated by Carl's tale of undying love, sent him letters of support. A 1940 newspaper poll showed 30% of locals believed he was more mad than bad. The defense capitalized on this, arguing Carl's actions harmed no one, living a claim that infuriated prosecutors. The judge, however, faced a dilemma. The charges didn't fully capture the crime's horror, and an insanity plea risked a lenient outcome. On November 6, 1940, the jury deliberated for hours. Carl's fate hung in the balance, his calm demeanor unnerving onlookers. Would the court see him as a lovesick dreamer or a calculating ghoul? The verdict would shock Key West and cement Carl's place in history. What would become of the man who loved beyond death? How would Elena's family find peace? The next part explores the trial's aftermath and Carl's final years. Stay with us and tell us in the comments. Did Carl's testimony make you pity him, or was it just a chilling performance? The verdict and the fallout. Can a town ever heal when its darkest secret is a man who loved a corpse? In November 1940, the trial of Carl Tanzler reached its climax, leaving Key West grappling with a verdict that would define a bizarre chapter in its history. If this haunting tale of obsession and desecration has you gripped, smash that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who crave shocking historical mysteries. Drop a comment below. Do you think justice was served for Elena, or did Carl escape too lightly? On November 2, 1940, the Key West courtroom held its breath as the jury delivered its verdict. Carl Tanzler, charged with disturbing a grave and destroying a tomb, was found guilty, but with a twist, the judge deemed him mentally unfit, sparing him prison. Instead, Carl was ordered to a psychiatric evaluation with the possibility of confinement in a state asylum. Court records note the jury's struggle. Some saw him as a monster, others a broken man driven by delusion. The Key West Citizen reported mixed reactions. Elena's family wept in frustration, feeling robbed of justice, while some locals sighed with relief, believing Carl was more pitiful than dangerous. Modern psychologists might argue the verdict reflected 1940s limitations in understanding mental illness, particularly disorders like erotomania, where obsessive love distorts reality. The aftermath was a media frenzy. National newspapers dubbed Carl the Corpse Bride Doctor, splashing his story across front pages. Elena's mummified body, seized by authorities, became a morbid spectacle. Against her family's wishes, it was displayed at a local funeral home for public viewing, drawing thousands of curious onlookers. A 1940 report estimated over 6,000 people filed past some horrified others, treating it as a carnival oddity. Nana Medina, Elena's sister, called it a second violation, her grief deepened by the exploitation. Eventually, Elena's remains were reburied in an unmarked grave to prevent further tampering a secret location known only to her family. Carl, released, pending his evaluation, returned to his cottage under scrutiny. Neighbors shunned him, and his once charming persona crumbled. He seemed unrepentant, telling reporters, "Elena's spirit still visits me." His diary, published in parts by a local paper, revealed chilling details. He believed he could resurrect Elena using electricity and spiritual energy. Modern scholars compare this to pseudoscientific obsessions of the era, like galvanism. But Carl's methods were pure fantasy, rooted in his delusional love. He crafted a life-sized effigy of Elena using plaster and her death mask and kept it in his home, a haunting reminder of his fixation. Key West struggled to move on. The Cuban community where Elena was beloved held vigils, their anger tempered by sorrow. Local businesses suffered as tourists avoided the town with the corpse doctor. Carl's hospital colleagues faced questions about why they hadn't noticed his behavior earlier. A 1941 investigation revealed lax oversight at the U.S. Marine Hospital, where Carl had used equipment for his experiments. The scandal prompted tighter regulations, a small legacy of reform amid the horror. Carl's psychiatric evaluation concluded he was delusional, but not a public threat, allowing him to avoid long-term confinement. By 1941, he slipped out of Key West, moving to Zephyr Hills, Florida, where he lived quietly, supported by his estranged wife, Doris. His story faded from headlines, but the scars remained. What would Carl do with his freedom? How would his obsession shape his final years? The next part explores his strange epilogue and the enduring legacy of his macabre love. Stay with us and tell us in the comments, did the verdict shock you, or was it the only option for a man like Carl? The haunting legacy. What does a man leave behind when his love story is written in the language of death? Carl Tanzler's bizarre tale didn't end with his trial in 1940. It lingered like a ghost haunting Key West and etching his name into the annals of dark history. If this chilling journey through a man's twisted obsession has you hooked, smash that like button, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, and share this video with friends who crave shocking true crime tales. Drop a comment below. Does Carl's story make you question the line between love and madness, or is it simply too horrifying to comprehend? After his trial, Carl Tanzler faded from Key West's spotlight, but his story left an indelible mark. Released after a psychiatric evaluation deemed him delusional, but not dangerous. Carl moved to Zephyr Hills, Florida in 1941, rejoining his estranged wife, Doris. Historical records show he lived quietly, working odd jobs and avoiding attention. Yet his obsession with Elena de Hoyos never wavered. In his small home, he kept the plaster effigy of Elena crafted from her death mask, dressed in her old gowns. Neighbors reported seeing him talk to it as if she were alive, a chilling echo of his Key West days. A 1944 letter Carl wrote to a friend claimed Elena's spirit still guided him, urging him to write a memoir. Published posthumously, The Secret of Elena's Tomb detailed his love beyond death, blending romantic fantasy with disturbing details of his preservation efforts. Key West, meanwhile, struggled to heal. Elena's family, particularly her sister Nana, lived with reopened wounds. The public display of Elena's body in 1940 had turned their grief into a spectacle, and they faced whispers about why they hadn't suspected Carl sooner. The Cuban community held annual memorials for Elena, praying for her soul's peace. Her unmarked grave, hidden to prevent further desecration, became a quiet shrine for those who remembered her vibrant life, not her grim fate. Local lore grew around Carl, with some claiming his cottage on Flagler Avenue was haunted, its windows glowing eerily at night. A 1950s urban legend warned children to avoid the corpse doctor's house, cementing his infamy. Carl's story also left a cultural footprint. His case inspired horror writers and filmmakers, with echoes in tales like Psycho and later Corpse Bride narratives. Scholars like Christine Quigley, in her 1998 book The Corpse, argue Carl's actions reflected a rare form of necrophilic obsession, distinct from violence, but no less disturbing. Modern psychologists point to his childhood visions of a destined bride as a root of his erotomania exacerbated by isolation, and a romanticized view of death prevalent in the early 20th century. His use of radiology equipment and preservation techniques fascinated forensic historians, showing a twisted ingenuity that blurred science and madness. The legal fallout was subtle but significant. Carl's case exposed gaps in Florida's laws, which lacked specific penalties for necrophilia or corpse desecration. By 1942, state regulations tightened around grave tampering, a direct response to the scandal. The U.S. Marine Hospital also reformed its oversight, ensuring staff couldn't misuse medical resources as Carl had. His story became a cautionary tale about unchecked obsession, showing how charisma and delusion could hide horror in plain sight. Carl died on July 3, 1952, at age 75, found slumped beside Elena's effigy. An autopsy revealed no new crimes, only a lonely man clinging to his fantasy. His death closed a chapter, but his legacy endures in true crime circles, where he's both pitied and reviled. Carl Tanzler wasn't a killer, but his violation of Elena's memory was a crime against humanity itself. His story warns us that love twisted by madness can become a nightmare. If you're haunted by Carl's tale, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it to spread this shocking history. Comment below. What's the most disturbing part of Carl's story? Want us to uncover another dark historical figure? Stay tuned for more chilling tales.